Are North Korean troops fighting on European soil? What do people think of Zelensky's victory plan? And why is a washed-up American entertainer willing to die for Putin? This is week 138 of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I'm Anna Belokur, reporting to you from Kyiv, and I'll be taking you through the top 3 stories from Ukraine this week. Since June, when Russian dictator Vladimir Putin made his first trip to Pyongyang in 24 years, rumors and anxieties have circulated about North Korea's potential increased involvement in Russia's war against Ukraine, whether supplying more weapons or signing new security pacts with Moscow. Following Putin's visit, North Korea announced that they would send engineering units from their military to assist Russian forces on the ground in Ukraine later in the summer. There was never any official confirmation of those engineering units arriving in Ukraine, but a Western diplomat told the Kyiv Independent this week that 6 North Korean officers were killed and 3 more injured in a strike near the occupied regional capital of Donetsk. Whether those officers were part of the engineering units is unknown, but the report comes amid other accounts from a diverse range of sources claiming that North Korean troops may already be fighting alongside the Russian military in various capacities. North Korean soldiers have allegedly been spotted in the Russian border regions of Bryansk and Kursk, where Ukraine is continuing its incursion into Russian territory. On Tuesday, Suspilne cited unnamed intelligence officials in a report that at least 18 North Korean soldiers have deserted their posts near the Ukrainian border. At a press conference in Brussels on Thursday, President Volodymyr Zelensky said that North Korea is gearing up to send a further 10,000 troops to fight in Ukraine, in addition to the unknown number already on the ground. This announcement came just days after a Western diplomat told the Kyiv Independent that 10,000 North Korean troops had indeed been sent to Russia. On Friday, military intelligence chief Kirill Budanov said that the number was upwards of 11,000 troops, of which 2,600 are already slated for deployment to Kursk. The implication here is hard to overestimate. If these reports are true, it means that North Korean troops are invading European soil. Zelensky described the participation of North Korean troops in Russia's invasion as the first step to a world war. However, as alarming as the prospect is, there are several things to consider. Firstly, North Korea's involvement here is that of an ally to the main aggressor. Although the North Korean military may wish to use Ukraine as sort of a training ground for weapons and combat experience for its troops, this is not a war that North Korea has a direct stake in, beyond an ideological desire to weaken the West. And even at the highest estimates, North Korea isn't sending nearly enough troops to significantly increase Russia's advantage so far. At the risk of being morbid, 10,000 troops is an average week and a half of casualties for the Russian army. And therein lies perhaps the main takeaway from this story. If Putin is willing to deploy the soldiers of one of his few allies, risking huge international backlash, it means that he is desperate to not mobilize any more of his own citizens. Even in the face of disheartening Russian ground advances in the east of Ukraine, this is a promising sign that not all is well in Moscow. Every week this month, we've gotten a little bit closer to knowing what's in President Volodymyr Zelensky's victory plan, and this week provided more insight as he presented the plan to the Ukrainian parliament on Wednesday, publicly revealing the most details of its contents so far. The plan calls for 5 categories of action: NATO membership, current defense against Russia, prevention of future Russian aggression in the form of non-nuclear deterrence, economic growth and cooperation, and post-war security architecture. Some parts of these categories are kept classified, but were shared with the leaders of major allied countries. So, Zelensky said on Thursday that he had presented the plan to Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump with the ultimatum that Ukraine will either join NATO or be forced to pursue nuclear capabilities on its own. He then clarified later that Ukraine is not in any way pursuing nuclear options, but rather that NATO membership is essential given the failure of the Budapest Memorandum, a 1994 agreement in which Ukraine ceded its nuclear arsenal in exchange for security guarantees from America, Britain, and Russia, which have clearly been ineffective in subsequent decades. Zelensky iterated that Ukraine is unequivocally seeking NATO membership, not weapons of mass destruction. Among the Ukrainian lawmakers that Zelensky presented the plan to, reactions were mixed. Many praised the objectives of the plan, but questioned the practical steps, or lack thereof. Others expressed that the plan itself was fine, but would be ineffective without the wholehearted backing of allies, something that is still not guaranteed by any means. When asked about it on Wednesday, U.S. Ambassador to NATO Julianne Smith said that although Ukraine's path to NATO is inevitable, the alliance has no intention of extending a membership invitation in the short term. The UK is reportedly preparing suggestions in response to the plan, as Zelensky continues to present its contents on the international stage. He pitched it to the European Council on Thursday, where Council President Charles Michel stated that Ukraine's destiny, the future of Ukraine, is within the EU. If you remember from last week, Zelensky was supposed to present the plan at a unique leader-level meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which consists of over 50 NATO countries that convene at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. But US President Joe Biden canceled his travel due to Hurricane Milton. This was a disappointment, as there was hope that the summit would yield strong diplomatic results and potential changes in policy surrounding the use of American long-range weapons against Russia. The summit has been rescheduled for a still not publicly known date in November, and will be held virtually rather than in person in Germany. And yes, that adds an unpredictable element into the mix. The US presidential election will be held on November 5th. Either the summit will be held in the very last days before a new American president is selected, or in the weeks immediately following. In either scenario, the decisions made at Ramstein will inevitably take the US election into account. Okay, I know what you've been thinking this whole time, and no, I'm not going to make a weekly habit of explaining Taras back there. If you've been wondering where I got this cool shirt, I'm happy to tell you. The Kyiv Independent now has a merch store where you can find clothing and accessories that represent our organization, as well as the work of some cool Ukrainian artists. We ship all over the world with very few exceptions, looking at you, Russia and North Korea, and the proceeds help us to continue bringing you independent news from Ukraine. 2 American celebrities made headlines for their comments about Russia this week. 80s actor and martial artist Steven Seagal has written, directed, and starred in a new documentary in which he personally investigates the invasion of Ukraine and the alleged crimes of Ukrainian nationalists there. Seagal has been a longtime admirer and even friend of Vladimir Putin, and he was granted Russian citizenship in 2016. He reveals in the documentary that he once wrote Putin a letter saying that he is willing to fight and die for him if needed. As thousands of you wrote in the comments when we shared this story on social media, absolutely nothing is stopping Seagal from joining the Russian military and doing exactly that. Although, nothing indicates that he's going to. Seagal wasn't the only celebrity voicing their affection for Russia this week. At a concert in Belgrade, the capital of Russian-friendly Serbia, and a popular landing spot for Russian immigrants, 30 Seconds to Mars frontman Jared Leto asked how many Russians were in the audience, and received enthusiastic screams in response. He then said that he missed Russia and couldn't wait to tour there again after all these problems finish. And yes, he actually did this when he said it. And yes, the problem he was referring to is the genocidal war that Russia is waging with no sign of stopping. He went on to say, "We're gonna go up to St. Petersburg, over to Moscow, we're gonna drop down to Kyiv, we're gonna party and hang out with everybody." Seagal is obviously an extreme example of a Westerner supporting Russia. Most don't move there and form personal relationships with the dictator himself. But I want to talk about Leto because he exemplifies a far more common mindset among Westerners. If you are a citizen of an economically and militarily powerful country, you have the extreme privilege of putting yourself above politics. You have the privilege of calling yourself neutral without endangering your safety or future. You have the privilege of looking for humanity in even the darkest of times and saying, "Give peace a chance," because your life, as well as the lives of your loved ones, friends, and fellow citizens, is not on the line. You might ask, even if Leto's comments were out of touch, were they harmful? Well, at a time when war fatigue is turning many people away from the horrors occurring every day in Ukraine, and Donald Trump has crowds of people cheering for Vladimir Putin at his campaign rallies, yes, it is harmful to imply that this war is something far away, perpetuated by abstract higher forces, rather than a brutal act of violence permitted and carried out every day by ordinary Russian citizens. As Leto played in Belgrade, Russian troops pushed into the Ukrainian city of Toretsk, a missile killed 4 people in Odessa, and the world reeled in shock at the news that a 27-year-old Ukrainian journalist was killed in Russian captivity. These are the problems that Leto hopes to shoo away so that his complete tour schedule can resume. That's all for this week. We'll be back next Sunday with more news from Ukraine. Our War Crimes Investigation Unit has just released a new investigative film, Shadows Across the River. Through personal stories and first-hand accounts, the film reveals the horrific realities of life for Ukrainians under Russian occupation on the east bank of the Dnipro River in southern Kherson Oblast since 2022. There will be a link to the film in the description below. Your support is what makes our work possible. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to this channel. If you'd like to become a member of the Kyiv Independent community, please visit the link in the description below. I'll see you next week.